Welcome to FSEL, and we are going to be discussing in this module the internet, then searching methodologies, the frameworks. We'll be talking about the information that's available online and how to effectively plan an online investigation and how it will impact your cases. So this graphic is really cool because it just shows how much the internet's changed in the last 20 to 30 years. Everything from America Online all the way to the Yahoo search engine being dominant, and of course now Google and Facebook have basically divided and conquered. So the graphic is important for two reasons. First of all, I just want to show you how websites come and go. Things change in this space very frequently. And if you look at the changes from the 5 years from 2013 to 2018, that's key right there. Second of all, if you look at eBay, it wasn't even in the top 20 in 2018, whereas it was again a dominant player back in 2003. So of course the technology advancements have also enabled much of the information, as you can see, to become user-driven. Twitter and Facebook, blogs, Wikipedia, it's all about user-generated content. Those are all really important things that have shifted the online environment, and that's a lot of what we are interested in as investigators. So this just shows how quickly things move. The internet is crazy fast. This was taken on January 15th, 2019, so it is entirely inaccurate. But again, just to show you the volume. So before we start talking about search strategies and frameworks, we really need to start planning. This is the first and most important part of the planning process. So the first piece of this process is considering the purpose of our case. So for example, if we're conducting a criminal investigation or a civil investigation, or we're doing business intelligence or competitive intelligence, looking at cyber or other physical security threats, what is the purpose behind what we're doing? The second piece is that we need to have authorization. It's very important to know that what you're doing is actually legally permitted through whatever authorities you are. In the private sector, if we were working for an attorney and conducting research for them, that is important to know. Finally, acting in a general lawful manner is probably a good thing. Then we need to sit down with the person who's asking for the research and ask them what the objective is. What do they expect from the result? What is the background? What kind of product are they looking for? And of course, when do they need it by? Resource issues, time, other things that have been done can be really helpful. So if they've already done something, it may be helpful to know what those are. This is also the pre-research after you talk to the requester, to be able to really understand the background and issues. So in this course, we're going to cover 6 main frameworks for online investigation. Some of them have been adapted from other sources, but they're very similar, I think you'll see. Some of these frameworks were done for a specific purpose, but I do want to show them since I think it's helpful to see the different ways that can better understand our own frameworks. This is the open source investigations and intelligence operations cycle developed by the RAND Corporation. It was published in a book that discussed the open source collection of national security intelligence by the intelligence community. And it does follow very closely with the traditional cycle of intelligence collection and analysis. In step 1, the investigator acquires and files the information in a way that can be accessed later. Step 2 is about translating any non-English material and bringing them together with other resources. In step 3, the analyst authenticates the information for reliability and also helps provide context and to begin to shape the understanding of the information as it's put together is very important. Finally, they produce it in a report form that includes appropriate security classifications and disseminates it to those with a valid need to know. This is the Army's open source model. It starts with planning and then goes to collection and preservation, and then it goes to moving to the analysis portion, and that is mainly with making sure the source is reliable and the information is authentic. Finally, it reviews the original plan and refines or recollects to ensure that no gaps are included. This is a great model for us because it provides a solid foundation for key tasks and considerations, but is also flexible enough to cover a multitude of projects. One of the most important things that we will do is to conduct the reliability and credibility assessment. We won't get into a lot of detail now, but making sure that the information presented is true and not manipulated is a huge deal now. This model is from NATO. It's a little dated in some aspects, but very simplistic. As you can see, it's a little dated and in some respects just very simplistic, and certainly reflects a Web 1.0 environment. But the 2 points that I want to emphasize here is the keyword search and refining the search. We'll talk more about keywords here shortly, but building a keyword list is absolutely critical. Cynthia Hetherington, one of the leading internet investigators, calls this building the taxonomy. In her book, The Guide to Online Due Diligence Investigations, she writes that tracking your keywords and leads will always pay dividends when you have to follow up later. See page 45. She also recommends organizing the list in a central place so you can easily add or retrieve it. I would also add that this is very helpful when you get a similar case later on. You won't have to reinvent the wheel, and that of course saves time and resources. Having a good keyword list can help us refine our searches, which hopefully get us more specific results, especially if we're searching for something that has common names or terms, like say a hacking group. These are 6 steps to developing a research plan, also from a military website. If you haven't already noticed, many of these models are very similar and have similar issues. I like to present them because I think showing them in a variety of ways helps us to think about them. It also demonstrates that we can do the same thing when we present a report to a prosecutor or to a judge or jury or a client. People learn in various ways, so showing the same thing in a multitude of ways can actually help with learning retention and persuasion as well. And as an aside, search lexicon is just a fancy way of saying keywords. Josh Huff is a private investigator whose Twitter handle is @Beowulf88. He's provided a great model. This was from a 2017 presentation at the Osmosis conference, which is an OSINT conference headed by Cynthia Hetherington's group. I adapted this model into the graphic form you see here, but I think it's one of the best overall models that I've found. I really like the use of the word pivot. So pivot, according to Oxford dictionaries, is synonymous with the words rotate, turn, revolve, spin, or swivel. This really means that the ability to move in any direction based on the information you have just gathered, that is the bottom line. By finding new connections and refreshing what the wealth of data you already have will help make connections, will help be invaluable to any information project or research. So here's the model that I created. And quite frankly, I actually wrote it before I had done any research on any of the others, but I do think it is a good way to visualize the process. It also assumes some of the more other basic steps in some of the other models, such as planning and pre-research. But my goal is to really look at the 4 main areas where we spend our time. First, we have to have a starting point. What information do we already have? That has to be something. Um, Otherwise, no one would ever ask us to do any research. Second, based on that information, we start to look at the types of data and the sources that are available. Some people call this their search strategy. Next, we conduct an initial test. This is because sometimes we need to make updates or change our tactics quickly. So if you're searching for a woman named Becky Smith, you may get lots of irrelevant results. So thinking about how to best narrow that and then testing it to see what you actually get for results. Finally, we need to save our results as we go. There's some tools that can help automate this, but having a save as you go mentality is very helpful. I often keep another document open on a screen or a notepad to jot down significant things to think about, since it greatly helps me when I need to finalize a report. Of course, this is an iterative process. Iterative is defined by Merriam-Webster as utilizing the repetition of a sequence of operations or procedures. It means you're always tweaking, refining, and repeating the steps and adjusting accordingly as you go in order to get a more cohesive and accurate product. Think of online investigations like a four-piece puzzle. We need to be able to connect these four main pieces together in order to get the best picture of what's happened. First of all, people are the key. Personal identifiers are important since they connect digital personas to real humans. Bots may exist, but they're ultimately controlled by a person. Crimes aren't committed by devices, but by living, breathing men and women. There can be a lot of psychology in these investigations since you have to think about how a person may act online, which may be very different than how they act in the real world. Second, financial and business data. In many of these cases, which could involve fraud, theft, intellectual property counterfeiting, sale of drugs, human trafficking, etc., they all have a profit motive. Even in the cases where monetary gain may not be the main driver, financial intelligence can play a critical role in connecting the human to the activity. Bank accounts, Bitcoin wallets, and all sorts of other things can be really helpful to an investigation. Third, social media intelligence. We'll have a whole session on this, but I think it's safe to say that social media investigation is probably the fastest growing method of conducting investigations online today. Finally, but maybe most importantly, things like domains, website metadata, IP information, technical evidence like logs and EXIF data for photos, geolocation indicators, these all play significant roles. Some areas are more prevalent than others, but they can be the connectors that finally fit that last piece of the picture together. Identifying and cataloging the resources that are available are an important component for any online investigator. A longtime colleague named Jim Rotolo has put together this spectrum of resource types for online investigations. They range from very generic subject guides, think of like the old Yahoo directory structure or something like Best of the Web, all the way up to very specialized databases with specific types of information, like a database of articles specifically from Time magazine from 1904 to 1983. We are all familiar with search engines and some of the meta search engines like DuckDuckGo or SearX.me, and these are they search over multiple types of other engines. I like to keep a list of frequently used websites in a notepad document that I use frequently, and I will post a version of this on Blackboard. I do keep it updated by date, so I always know when the latest revision was, since things come and go. There are also now some excellent websites that I'll show shortly to bookmark and keep handy. We've talked a little bit about keywords, but let's spend a few more minutes in depth on this. The first step is to look at the model and think about all the issues we've been talking about. What's the objective? What's already been done? What pre-research do I need to do? Building a keyword list is part of that pre-research, especially if it involves a more technical issue or subject matter you are unfamiliar with. Having and building variations are good too, and I'll show you an example in the next 2 slides. But remember that people don't always spell correctly. I remember reading through an email search warrant of a target I was investigating and thinking how awful their spelling was. Make sure you use spelling variations or things like slang terms, jargons, or common technical acronyms. Let's take a look at an example. So let's say that I'm on a security team responsible for tracking the safety and security leading up to the NFL Super Bowl in Atlanta. If my job is to monitor the Twitter sphere for any signs of problems, then my team and I would want to brainstorm a good list of things to include in the monitoring stream. If I'm also looking for potential security gaps or vulnerabilities, I would want to do some historical research on past Super Bowls. For example, I could use the hashtag protecting Atlanta, but that may also return a whole lot of unrelated results. Maybe I would need to narrow the time frame to a few weeks before the date. And as this slide illustrates, having a variety of ways of attacking the problem is a good way to start building your keyword list or key phrases. And remember, we've said it before, some people just don't spell well. So you want to test some of the common misspellings to see what comes back. If not much returns, then that's good. But if they do, you will want to include those. Here's an example in a foreign language. This is a sample of some search terms that RAND Corporation did in their publication that we referenced earlier. You can see that this is primarily in Arabic. The variations include spelling and slight grammatical changes, as well as different ways of pronouncing or usage in the native language. These are common terms related to the Islamic State terrorist group. In the US, we call them ISIS for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, but they also have their own terms, ones we don't commonly use. The term Daesh is the common referring the way the Europeans refer to the same group. So remember, if you search just for ISIS, you might get results that deal with the Egyptian god for the sun, Isis. There's also a scientific journal started in the early 1900s